Hi, everybody. This is the intro to the last unit for PSC 2902 Politics and Film. This unit is on freedom of the press. And there are two movies required for this unit. One is The Post, starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. The other is All the President's Men, starring Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. Um, so, um, these two movies are about the same newspaper, the Washington Post. You should watch them in the chronological order of the events they depict. The Post is about the Pentagon Papers in the early 1970s and their sort of race with the New York Times to get the story out and to emerge on the scene as a real contending national newspaper. The All the President's Men is about the exploits of these two reporters, uh, uh, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who um, uncover a lot of the Watergate scandal. So it's their story more than anyone else's. One of the things you might want to pay attention to is how two different actors portray the character of Ben Bradlee, who is the editor of the Washington Post. In the first one, it's Tom Hanks. In the second, it's Jason Robards, somebody you're probably not familiar with. Uh, Take a shot at it in terms of who you think did a better job of portraying Robards. But here's a spoiler alert. For those of us who lived through the time and knew what Ben Bradlee did and how he acted and how he spoke, what he looked like, Jason Robards is pretty damn good. Even though you might like Tom Hanks better, he's probably a more likable individual. And of course, since it's about 2 years earlier, maybe the Ben Bradlee character is a little less crusty. Um, so there's a bunch of folks in here, especially in All the President's Men, you might recognize as they were um, early in their careers, and you may have seen them in movies that came later. What's important here is, again, the freedom of the press, the extent to which legitimate news sources like the New York Times and the Washington Post um, have a responsibility to provide a check on our government. Governments don't like it when newspapers do that, or TV stations or whatever networks. Um, but it's part of why we have the protection for freedom of the press. You'll get some of the subtleties here, like anonymous sources, how reporters try to protect their sources, and so on. Um, we have a connection, obviously, in the second movie to the character of Deep Throat, who is portrayed by Hal Holbrook. That's as one other character refers to him. That is Woodward's garage freak. You may also notice an actor there too, portraying one of the editors of the Washington Post. Um, that is Martin Balsam, who was in 12 Angry Men, one of the jurors. So we're seeing these actors pop up throughout. Um, these are two good movies, I think, for us to end on because they are, in many respects, very uplifting about the power of the press to bring um, bad actors in the government um, into public scrutiny. And in the case of Richard Nixon, um, overall, between both the Pentagon Papers and Watergate, it was the efforts of the press that really led to his ultimate downfall. He was not impeached. He came this close. Um, he resigned before the full House could vote on the articles of impeachment that had been passed by the House Judiciary Committee. One of the other reasons why it's a good idea to watch these in the chronological order in which the events took place is because of the way the Post ends and All the President's Men begins. Um, The closing scene, and it's not giving anything away plot-wise. The closing scene of Washington Post, of the Post, shows a lone watchman in the night coming across a door that had been taped so that the bolt wouldn't go through. What they don't show you is that that was his second pass. He had actually removed the tape earlier, thinking that it was just painters who had been in the building earlier in the evening had left the tape behind. It's a way that workmen can get in and out without having to get the door locked and relocked every time they go in and out. They tape the bolt open so that they can just go in and out. But Fred Wills, the security guard who came across it, thought it was kind of odd that here it was his second pass through, and he had already removed the tape, and the painters were gone. What's the tape doing back there? So he calls the police. Now the Post ends with that, and All the President's Men basically opens with that, and they're very similar scenes. And I think that the makers of the Post did that to have that link to All the President's Men because it's the same newspaper. Now, it's a year later that that event happens from the argument in the Pentagon Papers case before the Supreme Court, but it's still sort of a nice transition. There are points at which you will hear characters in the Post um, hope that they don't ever have to go through anything like that again. The legal battle they get into over the Pentagon Papers, and yet just looming around the corner is the Watergate scandal. Anyway, enjoy the movies, and I'll catch up with you during the text chats and our last video chat.